Hi everybody. Today's video is about simplifying complex fractions. So our goal is to actually simplify complex fractions. So there are some steps for you to refer back to. The first step would be to factor if possible, then find the least common denominator in order to add or subtract any fractions, multiply by the reciprocal instead of divide, and then last step, factor if possible, and reduce any remaining fractions. So I'll talk about those as we go along, but you can always refer back to that. So step one is to factor if possible. Well, none of these denominators can be factored, so I need to find the least common denominator. Well, this denominator has an x, so I'm going to need that. And the other two have an x plus 2. But those are the only two portions I can combine to make the least common denominator. So what I need to do is add these two fractions together on the bottom. So what this one is missing is an x plus 2 over x plus 2. And this first one is just missing the x portion, the x factor in the least common denominator. So I'm going to leave the top one as 2 over x plus 2. And I'm just going to add together multiply these bottom two fractions. So that gives me x plus, then I'm going to distribute this 2 over here to 2x plus 4 over my common denominator, which is x times x plus 2. So all I did was add these two fractions together. I found the least common denominator and made that happen. So that I can combine like terms, so that gives me the top fraction stays the same, 2 over x plus 2. I haven't done anything with that yet. And on the bottom, I've got 3x plus 4 over x times x plus 2. And let's take a second to remember what it means to divide by a fraction. So maybe up here I will write this. Up here, multiply by the reciprocal, instead of divide. That's important. That's what I'm going to do next. Multiplying by the reciprocal is the same as dividing by that fraction. So all I'm going to do is rewrite this problem because who likes to divide fractions? Nobody. So I'm going to take this fraction and multiply by the reciprocal instead. So my first fraction was 2 over x plus 2. And now instead of dividing by this fraction, I'm going to multiply by the reciprocal. So that would be x times x plus 2 over 3x plus 4. So all I'm doing is rewriting it. And then when I multiply fractions, I get to multiply the numerators together and the denominator. So that gives me 2x times x plus 2 over x plus 2 times 3x plus 4. So all I did was multiply the numerator and the denominator. And I'm going to cancel anything. I'm going to reduce this fraction. So the top has an x plus 2 and the bottom. So I get to cancel that out. And my final answer is 2x times 3x plus 4. All right. I'm going to move on. If you need to rewind that and try again, please, please, please do so. So this one over here, I'm going to factor first. So I've got x squared, x to the fourth. Those can't be factored. But that bottom right denominator can. So 1 over x squared minus 2 over. Now we know a lot of ways to factor. We know difference of squares, difference of cubes, grouping, trinomial. Well, this one is just plain old GCF. My GCF is x squared, so I'm left with x plus 1. And what I need to do is then go to step 2 and add and subtract any fractions if possible. So I need to combine the two fractions on the bottom. In order to do that, I need an LCD. I need a least common denominator. So they both actually have this x squared. And then the second one has this x plus 1. So that takes in everything. So what is that first one missing? Well, it's missing the x plus 1 over x plus 1. And then what about the second one? Well, it's not missing anything, so I don't need to do any multiplication there. Excuse me. So again, I'm not even touching this top fraction yet. That's just staying 1 minus x, excuse me, over x to the fourth. And now I'm going to combine this. So I'm going to distribute this 1. It just becomes x plus 1 minus 2 over x squared times x plus 1, because now I have this common denominator. So then, before I move on, maybe I'll combine like terms up top. So it gives me 1 over 1 minus x over x to the fourth all over x minus 1 over x squared times x plus 1, right? Because 1 minus 2 is negative 1. So now I have one fraction divided by another fraction, but we don't like that. We don't like to divide by fractions. So what do? What do you think? Do I just leave it and pretend like I know what I'm doing? No, we multiply by the reciprocal instead. So that gives me 1 minus x over x to the fourth multiplied by x squared times x plus 1 over x minus 1. And then I get to multiply these fractions together. So I'm just going to do x squared times x plus 1 times 1 minus x over x to the fourth times x minus 1. Now, I want you to be extra careful here, right? We're just multiplying means I get to multiply numerator and denominator. But seriously, like super careful. What do you think about this 1 minus x and x minus 1? Technically, they're not the same. So I'm going to do this in another color over here. So 1 minus x and x minus 1. Here, this is a positive 1 and a negative x. This is a positive x and a negative 1. So it's not the same thing, but it is extremely close. If you take this 1 minus x and factor out a negative 1, you get negative 1 plus x, right? We're just dividing each by negative 1. And then now, since I'm adding, I could really write this as x minus 1. Now it's the same thing as that original x minus 1 that I saw. Both x's are positive, and both 1's are negative. They have to be the exact same. So we can't cancel those yet, but I could write this. I'm going to bring that negative 1 way out in front, times x plus 1 times x minus 1, right? I'm changing that one to x minus 1 because of that factored negative 1. That's really important. I keep erasing. Over x to the fourth times x minus 1. Now, and only now, am I allowed to cancel that there. And then I need to notice if I have two x's on top, I can cancel it with the bottom, but I still have 2, right? 4 minus 2 is 2. So it leaves me with negative 1 times x plus 1 over x squared. The only thing left was that x squared. All right, so this topic really just sort of synthesized all the information that you've learned so far. So we already know how to add and subtract fractions. So we do that first. We find any that we need to combine, and we combine them by finding the least common denominator. And when I do that and simplify everything, I'm left with one fraction divided by another fraction. We don't like that. We don't like dividing by fractions. So instead, I multiply by the reciprocal, and then I just reduce till I'm done. And we did that over in this example too, right? I had two fractions on the bottom that I could subtract. So I did that by getting a common denominator. And after I simplified everything, I was left with two fractions, one divided by the other. We don't like that. That's why we multiplied by the reciprocal here. And once I did that and simplified very, very carefully, I came to my final answer. So again, my suggestion to you is to make sure you know every step of these problems. All parts are important. And be ready to do some more practice when we see each other next. See you then.